trade-off between growth and climate performance is breaking down. Leading companies and countries are showing that revenues can rise while emissions fall when efficiency, electrification, and clean innovation reinforce competitiveness. In today's first Exponential Roadmap session, we will explore the new economics of decoupling, what separates leaders from laggards, and how to scale value creation with lower emissions. The timing has never been better. The current fossil fuel crisis is not only a warning signal, it is also a unique opportunity to accelerate clean solutions and strengthen resilience and also sovereignty. So our guests here in the studio, Mattias Frumery, Climate Ambassador, Swedish Ministry of Climate and Enterprise. Terrific to have you with us, Mattias. Next to Mattias is Maria Azul Schwarzman, your norm-setting engagement manager for the World Benchmarking Alliance. Welcome to the studio. Wonderful to have you. And on Zoom, we should be having Ramon Mendez Galain. I'm not sure he's with us, but I'll introduce him anyways because he might show up. He's president of REN 21 and former energy secretary of Uruguay. And in the Stockholm studio, we have Owen Gaffney. He's co-founder and chief scientific officer, the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. There we go. There we have Ramon Mendez Galain. Terrific to have you with us. So I'm going to start turning to Owen in the Stockholm studio. Could you please explain the term crocodile economics and present the latest updates from the Exponential Roadmap Initiative?
Hi, Katarina. I hope you can hear me.
We can.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. I wish you could be there in Colombia. Yeah, it's great to be talking about this topic because, as you say, you know, the decoupling is the key topic we need to be talking about. Here at Exponential Roadmap Initiative, I'm going to talk through for a few minutes what we call crocodile economics, the economics of decoupling. And this is based on you know, a new platform we're developing right now because the evidence is just becoming completely overwhelming that we're going through a massive structural change in the global economy, and this has been happening for several decades, and things, you know, the pace can be so slow that it can be quite incremental, and you don't notice it. But now we look back and we can see the bigger picture. So I'm going to talk through really which countries are genuinely decoupling and which companies are decoupling. So the first thing we're going to look at here is, you know, actually around 49 countries in total have decoupled their growth from their emissions. And we see this not just in their territorial emissions, the emissions coming from within the country, but also their consumption emissions that are emitted elsewhere, and as goods are being imported into countries. But we can see this trend, which we call, you can see why it's called crocodile economics. We have the mouth of a crocodile here, and this, you know, going back to, in some cases, the you know, the 2000s or so, late 90s, we see the start of decoupling in some countries, and that's continuing on. And you know, we see like the European Union here as one of the graphs here on the second row. You know, as the whole, you know, 27 countries, you know, a massive shift over the last few decades. So this just isn't a blip. This isn't a bump in the road, or, you know, a small shift. These are major shifts that are happening year on year. It's not just as a result of, you know, one shock or you know, or an economic shock. These are long-term structural changes in countries. And here's a fuller list of countries going through the transition, and as I say, so it's you know, a quarter of the countries in the world, and about 50% of global GDP, if you look at it in that way, is represented in the countries decoupling. So massive shifts there. So then the next thing we've done with this dashboard is then we've been working with CDP and other providers of data, science-based targets initiative, and Klimatkollen here in Sweden, to bring in company data to see if we can see similar trends with companies and how they're decoupling. So we have almost 1,000. We've got over 900 companies in our database now. It's growing every week, actually, and we're looking at what's happening. And we can see that the signal's also very clear. We see the definite crocodile economics signal here. Here we're looking at companies with revenue over 10 billion. And we're looking at scope 1 and 2 emissions. And we're seeing some of the major corporations are making progress there. And if you look, and then you can say, well, okay, scope 1 and 2, but that's the easy emissions. What about scope 3? So this is scope 1, 2, and 3 for the companies we've looked at with revenues of over 10 billion, and then we can see some the crocodile pattern is telling a convincing story here that there is some real shifts going on. I mean, we don't have as much data going back as far as we do for countries. This is just emerging, in the last 5-6 years. We're getting better and better data from companies. But as the years go on, the data will improve, and we can do some deeper analysis of the kind of trends that we're seeing. Now, I'll just finish by saying, it's fantastic news. This is long-term structural changes we're seeing with certainly with countries and now with companies. Is it at the scale we need? So it's not at the scale we need for countries, without doubt. It's we can see on average that the shifts, the reductions in emissions are perhaps 1.5%, 2%, 3%, 4%. And we need more than that. We need emissions reductions of 7% or so to really start getting onto the kind of carbon law trajectories, the trajectories that will really allow us to halve emissions every decade. So we need to really ramp up the level of emissions reductions. But the good news, though, and to finish on some good news, is that a lot of the reductions have just come from the energy sector. There's the other major sectors. We have industry, we have transport, we have the food sector, we have buildings. They're not coming through so strongly in the signals yet, but we can see that these are the big areas that are seeing huge amounts of change. So that'll start growing and what needs to happen really is that we need strategies that push all sectors at the same time to get up to that plus 7% emissions reductions per year, which we need to see. And note that the European Union, I think in 2023, reduced emissions 7% due to efficiencies and a big shift away from fossil fuels. So it is feasible. Over to you, Katarina.
Thank you very much indeed, Owen. I'm turning now to Ramon because Uruguay is indeed a great example of crocodile economics as a country. So what could you say? What are your reflections after having listened to Owen's presentation, please?
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. So my most important comment is that today, thanks to the climate efforts, today renewables are the best option that we can have in the climate in the energy sector, for example. So we have already new technologies that are delivering and then can make the transition possible, not just as an effort, not just as a contribution, as the NDC was the possibility, but today renewables are just the best issue that we can have on our system. So what happened in Uruguay? Uruguay, we had 98% of renewables in the power mix, and this helped us to reduce by a factor of 2 the cost of producing electricity. We created about 50,000 new jobs, which is 3% of the total labor force of the country. So we proved not only that the new renewable economy is possible, but we prove it that is best than the one that we have today. So my most important comment is that today there's no longer neither a technology issue nor a finance issue, but the point is decision making, because the best for our countries is to go at least in the energy sector, at least in the power sector, to go to renewable energies, which is the best geopolitical, economic, labor, and climate option.
Thank you, Ramon. So, from your perspective as Energy Secretary of Uruguay, could you please briefly tell us how you achieved this?
Well, yes, of course. In fact, it's very simple in the way that, once again, it's not a technological issue. It's not a finance issue. In fact, is a regulatory and market design issue. What I mean is that our market, our system, our energy system has been built according to the characteristic of fossil fuels, and that's fine because till some years ago they were the best that we can have. But now that we are willing to introduce new technologies, renewable technologies, then we need to not just to change from one fuel to another fuel, but we have to restructure our power system. So we dramatically changed the way we plan the system, the way we operate the system. So there were a number of regulatory changes that we had to define, to redefine. We have to completely redefine our market design, going from short-term traditional energy market to a long-term capacity market. And so this was crucial in order to attract investors. In fact, we received something like $6 billion investment for a country which economy size is only 50 billion. So 12% of the GDP investment in just 4 to 5 years, because we created the appropriate condition to attract investment. And that's why we made it. I mean, in only 4 to 5 years, we went from about 50% fossil fuels in the power share to only 2% of fossil fuels in the power share. In fact, in 2024, we reached our optimum, which was 99.1% of renewables in the grid. And in fact, yes, we had to solve some technical issues, but we understood how to that in fact dealing with solar and wind intermittency was not really rocket science. You know, at the end of the day, human engineering has succeeded to put a man in the moon 50 years ago. So solving intermittency, it was not just a rocket issue, a rocket science issue. Was complicated, but we did it in a small country like Uruguay. So anybody can do it, following exactly the same kind of pathway.
Excellent. And your example is also in the Planetary Guardian's report of energy freedom that was just presented here in Santa Marta. So that Uruguay really stands out. Thank you for sharing this. So Matthias Fremery, what could you say about crocodile economics from your experience and perspective?
Great to be with you. And I think the graphs which we've seen, which Owen showed, I mean, it really points to the experience that we have from a Swedish perspective, but also from an EU perspective, you know, that we are decoupling growth from emissions. And I think it was interesting to see also the companies. The first time I saw that, that kind of data which you have delivered. And I think it speaks to the point which was made also by company representatives here in Santa Marta yesterday, saying that for companies to be able to decarbonize, they need policy clarity. Mm-hmm. And we've been hearing that very strongly also from Swedish companies. You know, we need to stay the course in terms of the EU approach to climate action. In the various types of instruments that we have at the EU level, for example, the emissions trading systems, there's very strong support for companies who have made their investments already to actually be able to provide these kind of products and services. And I mean, what I hear from Swedish companies, at least, is that, you know, they're doing this transition because it makes them more profitable, and this is where the market will be. So this whole idea of decoupling or crocodile economics, I really think shows sort of how the market will be developing. But of course, it also needs for all countries to be putting those kind of regulatory frameworks in place.
So Matthias, how do you see the importance of scaling up solutions and how leading countries and companies can work in tandem really to accelerate the fossil phasing out and also the decoupling moving forward? What is with the tandem with the countries and the companies and the regulatory perspectives here?
Well, having that kind of dialogue, and I think the conference here in Santa Marta brings various types of actors together, and I think again, you know, showing the importance and usefulness of having that kind of regulatory clarity for countries to be setting long-term targets, but also breaking those down in terms of how we will be managing our transition in the next couple of years. I mean, the NDCs are a great example of how countries will actually display and showcase how they are transitioning away from fossil fuels as well. And of course, for us as countries to be working together as well for NDC implementation. And I'm proud to see that from a Swedish perspective, we can be supporting not only with policy support and working with partners to develop that kind of policy, but also providing solutions across a range of different sectors. Energy sector, obviously, but also, as was said here, in transport, in industry, food systems, waste management, there are solutions available across the board. So I think it is upon countries to ensure that you have that kind of regulatory environment, but also an attractive investment climate, with everything, freedom from corruption, functioning institutions, to make sure that investors have the confidence of providing those kind of investments and solutions.
Thank you, Matthias. Turning now to Maria, the World Benchmarking Alliance is specifically benchmarking corporate transition plans, correct? And they're important to accelerate solutions of phasing out fossil fuels. So could you share the reflections on Crocodile economics from your perspective, and also what you heard from Uruguay and from Owen and from Matthias?
Yes, sure. Thank you. So is it working?
Yeah,
right?
it's working.
Sorry. So first of all, I need to give a kudos to Exponential Roadmap, because that term crocodile economics, once you see the graphs, you can't unsee them, right? So it really sticks with you. So
We even have a crocodile behind here.
so kudos to that. But as you were saying, we at the World Benchmarking Alliance, we analyzed the 2,000 biggest companies of the world in their corporate transition plans. And like Owen was saying, we see these data points that decoupling is possible. Of course, it's not the norm, and we're still not there yet, but we see companies that have valid 1.5 aligned long-term targets, that are involving their communities and their workers in their transitions, that are allocating capital expenditure to low carbon options. So we do see that it is possible. And I have this data point that from our latest research that we published on the 280 biggest energy intensive companies of the world, that without any major political technological shift, companies could easily up by 30% their low carbon capex as of now. They only need to believe that it's the best for their business. So I think that is a very strong signal that the crocodile economics work and could be in the future for the biggest companies of the world.
So Maria, what are you picking up here in Santa Marta in this field?
Yeah, so for context as well, WBA is here as a co-lead of the private truck sector, so together with Fortescue and BYD. And I think that, as Matthias was saying, one of the two key messages that we've heard from the private sector is we need clear long-term policy signals. And here is where, coincidentally, Uruguay and also Chile were brought up as examples in the region where policies have lived through administrations, which if you're from the region like I am from Argentina, where that rarely happens. It is very positive, and companies were saying we can operate here and we can put capital in a green transition because we know that we have long-term policies that are backing that.
How does that resonate with you, Matthias, the long-term policy view here?
Absolutely, and I think that's what we're trying to achieve also here in Santa Marta, to rally more actors and countries around that approach to having these kind of long-term policies. How we as Sweden are trying to engage also with partners to highlighting the benefits of having those kind of long-term policies, again, because that's what we hear from our business actors that they need in order to be able to also, as you scale the kind of solutions that they have available already. And I think, again, coming back to the NDCs, if we aggregate the information we have in the NDCs, we can both see also at a global level what is the demand signals that the NDCs are sending to various types of actors, within the transport sector, for example. Which countries want to focus on charging infrastructure, and which actors can provide that, which countries want to focus on, green steel, and which actors can provide that. So by aggregating also the information we already have in the NDCs, we can see where the world is headed. Obviously, it's not enough. We need to do more, but at least as a starting point in terms of how to scale these solutions by looking into the kind of policy signals that we see in the NDCs.
And talk about tandem between countries and companies, just looking at Ethiopia with their super impressive setting of plans for electrical vehicles, and it's really skyrocketing, just like we saw here. So turning now back to Owen in Stockholm, what would you say are the major enablers and also the blockers to really have more crocodiles all over the place, so to speak?
Okay, and I mean, yeah. So the policy framework, so the regulatory framework, obviously is a huge game changer. You know, it creates the kind of energy, the kind of drive that we need, and that long term commitment. You know, gives confidence that the policies will stay in place and companies can act. I mean, so but. And basically, what we've seen with energy is that now companies in many regions of the world, they have easy access to clean energy. So that's fantastic because you know a large percentage of most companies' emissions are from on the energy side. So it's easy to make that switch. But then we get into the next stage of decarbonization when it comes to transport, when it comes to buildings, when it comes to the rest of industrial emissions, when it comes to the land use and food. So those other sectors, that's going to be the frontier over the next few years, and this is where we need really strong signals from policy on the kind of transformations we need there. So I'd say we've hit tipping points with wind and with solar. They're in a new phase of growth, which is brilliant news. And we're at a tipping point with electric vehicles to a certain extent in many places in the world, and way past a tipping point in some places. China, it's 50%, and you know Norway, it's over 90%. So incredible progress there. But there's all these other transitions that need to happen as well that haven't reached that tipping point, and we need the kind of regulations in place to push us up that curve.
Thank you. And during the pre-conferences here, before the plenary, the high level here and today and yesterday, there have been many meetings on just transition from an indigenous people's perspective, and also the aspect of extractivism has been brought up in many fields. And of course, this energy transition has a high demand for all sorts of minerals and other materials that could be in fields and lands and regions that could be affected by this industry. So how do we make sure that this decoupling and this energy transition is also done in a just way from that perspective? So what could you say, Matthias? You've been working in this field for a long time. It's complicated, but we really need to make sure. We have this problem in Sweden too.
I think one experience which we can bring is, you know, the experience from structural reforms of our economies historically as well. And what has helped us, and I think other economies, is you know, ensuring that you have that kind of structured dialogue with, you know, in your labor market, that you have social security systems in place. And of course, all countries need to choose their own model for doing this. But having that kind of inclusivity when designing new policies and ensuring that those individuals and communities or companies that are affected by the transition are also part of finding the solutions. And I think that's what's coming out very clearly from the various actors engaged here at the Santa Marta conference. And hopefully that sort of provides also momentum for countries globally to be ensuring that you have those kind of systems in place. And you know, obviously it's going to be looking different in different types of countries, but just having that kind of dialogue, and then of course making sure that you have systems to sort of make the trade-offs as well, because
there will be trade-offs.
The inclusivity doesn't mean that everybody gets, you know, their wish through, but you have to be transparent in how the decisions are being made and find that kind of acceptance as well at sort of the community level.
Thank you, Matthias. Any reflections from your side, Owen, on this topic?
Well, just following from Matthias, I would also say that ensuring that that local communities and indigenous communities economically benefit from these new industries, and a part of this this new industry. You know, I know in the UK, for example, you know, local communities, have got huge incentives on renewable energy. They're being offered much lower rates for electricity, for example, in areas with wind turbines and things. So providing those sorts of economic incentives, and I think sort of new ownership models as well for in these areas is it would be really exciting and would help build support for this transition. I think, and finally to say, what one of the big things that's slowing us down is permitting, and I know Matthias knows this very well on the scale out of renewables, and we need to find some mechanisms that are both extremely respectful to local communities, indigenous communities, and can accelerate the permitting of to allow us to scale rapidly. And the benefits are there. What a clear, obvious benefit is energy independence at all sorts of scales, if we can scale at the required rate.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Owen, Ramon, Matthias, and Maria, for sharing your insights in this panel. The dialogue will be continuing, and this is a very, very exciting trajectory that we see with the gap and the crocodile. And as I said, we already have a crocodile here in the studio. There might be more crocodiles coming, who knows? But thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day. And now let's move on.